Assalamualaikum students. Today we will discuss variance and properties of the standard deviation and variance. How to calculate variance. In our previous lecture, we have discussed standard deviation for group and ungroup. And today we will discuss how to convert standard deviation into variance and how to calculate variance from standard deviation.
Variance. This is a formula of the variance. The first step that we do in standard deviation, and if we calculate or if any question is given in which standard deviation is given, and we calculate the variance, so we use this formula, and standard deviation is also present with this. To understand the concept of variance, what is variance, how to calculate variance, we do one example. This is example we already discussed in our previous lecture. So to calculate variance, this is a formula, or this step we done uh, in our previous example. So let's x minus mean, this is a x, and minus mean we take the whole square, and this is the answer of 56. So simply 56 divided by 7, and the answer is 8. So the variance is 8. And to calculate the standard deviation, simply, and the variance is 8. This is a answer of standard deviation. And to convert the standard deviation into variance, we take the square root, and the answer is 8. To calculate variance from standard deviation, this is a square, and answer 2.828 and some. So this, and the answer is 8. This step we already discussed in our previous lecture. Coefficient of the variation. This is a formula of the coefficient of the variation, standard deviation divided by mean multiplied by 100. To understand the coefficient of the variation, or how to calculate the coefficient of the variation, let's do one example. In our previous lecture, we calculated question number 13. So in question number 13, this is a mean, and firstly we calculate variance, then we calculate coefficient of the variance or the variation. So the variance is equal to summation f x minus mean divided by summation f, and the answer of this part is 687, and the summation f x minus mean square, answer is 687.3.14 divided by summation f is 200, and the answer is 6,873.14 divided by 200, and the answer is 34.3657. This is a variance. To calculate standard deviation, under root variance, 34.3657, and the answer is 5.86. So the standard deviation is 5.86. And to calculate the standard variance from the standard deviation, simply, so here is the variance from the standard deviation. Simply, variance is standard deviation 5.86 n square, 5.86, which is standard deviation, and we take the square root, and the same answer is. To calculate the coefficient of the variation, this is a question number 13. We already discussed how to calculate mean or standard deviation of this question. So simply I put the values. Standard deviation is 5.86, and the mean of this question is 82.425 multiplied by 100. 5.86 divided by 82.425 multiplied by 100, and the answer is 7.10. So answer is 7.10. This is the answer. Basically, in coefficient of the variation is measure the variation in data or two series of the data, and if the value of the data is 0, then no meaning of the coefficient of the variation. We use the standard deviation or standard deviation value. If the value is smaller, it show near to the mean, and if the value is greater, then it will show the variation in data. To measure the variation in data, we use the coefficient of the variation, which is show the accuracy in data. And if the value is if the value of the coefficient of the variation is smaller, it show the consistency in data, and if the value of the coefficient of the variation is large, it show that less consistency in data. So coefficient of the variation is basically show the consistency in data. Properties of the standard deviation. And standard deviation is positive if all the values are the negative, or standard deviation is 0 if the value are the same or the constant, and standard deviation does not change by change in origin. And in normal or symmetrical distribution, mean plus minus standard deviation contain 68.27 observations. So the value of the mean is above and below the standard deviation show the 68.27 observation, and like this, in this case, mean is above and below between 2 and 3rd standard deviation. If all the values are negative, then standard deviation is positive. We already discussed this step. And if all the observation or all the values are the constant or the same, then standard deviation is 0. For example, x is 4 and x minus mean is 4, 4 minus 4 0, and the standard deviation is 0, and the standard deviation is does not affected by change in origin, or if we added or subtract the constant. Standard deviation of the x plus a is and x minus a is also a, so no change.